Welcome back. I'm Beth. We're going to be doing the top of your head book tag. Winter, in my mind, is such a great time to remember to slow down, rest more, and just embrace the quiet and the space where you can find it. I think that's one of the reasons why having the ground blanketed with snow gives us so much more white space. There is not a lot to see, and so when we do see things that are beautiful, we appreciate it more. With that in mind, the whole philosophy behind this tag from the Library Mouse is that you give the answer that is top of mind without overthinking it. For me, an over-prepared overthinker, what could go wrong? I think this is a really cool one to learn more about each other. Question 1. What was your favorite picture book as a child? I feel like my mom could probably answer this question better than me, but because this doesn't really have a phone a friend option, it's just top of your head. I do remember a board book called Stories Jesus Told, and it has this really whimsical, kind of cutesy illustration style. I still remember the illustrations from that book in my head when I'm reading about the parables that Jesus used to tell people about the kingdom of heaven and what a meaningful life looks like. Number 2, what series did you love as a child? So many. Top of mind though would be the Boxcar Children by Gertrude Chandler. My mom would take me and my 2 brothers to the library once a week, and this was a series that I would continually be grabbing more from, at least 4 books a week. I would read through one of those little paperbacks in one day. I just loved to imagine things when I was playing at that age, and I felt like such a connection to the Boxcar Children themselves, who were living in this abandoned boxcar, and they took pleasure in simple things like finding blueberries and rinsing them in the cold water from the stream. They eventually get adopted and they get to go to all these exciting places and solve mysteries. I feel like that's one of those series that got licensed and it just has never ended. I could be wrong. Let me know. Question number 3 is, what's the worst book you've read or tried to read? I don't always share books that I dislike here on YouTube. I feel like that doesn't really serve anyone, because just because I didn't like a book doesn't mean that you won't like it unless it's like really egregious. Okay, so I tried the first book of the Winter's Night trilogy by Katherine Arden, and I read that last winter. I just thought going into it that there would be like a little bit of a darker fairy tale vibe set in the winter. I appreciate the Russian folktale aspect of it, but there was kind of like an undercurrent of blaming Christianity, chasing out like the magical creatures in the land. They're the problem in the story, rather than like maybe the maliciousness of those folk and what they decided to do to humans being a problem. The writing style and everything about that was almost claustrophobic. You get this feeling like you're trapped, and I think that's why a lot of people love it, is because it feels like wintertime. But I didn't feel compelled to continue on in that trilogy. I still feel a little bummed about it because I know so many people love it, but I think the first book really just kind of burned me on my expectations, and so I did not continue in that series. Question number 4 is, what's your favorite reading or book memory? Before malls became dead and no one goes there anymore because they all shop online, there was this giant chain that I think was also owned by the company that owned Borders, and Walden Books. It was the only bookshop near where I lived, and when we walked by that store, whether or not I was already holding my mom's hand, we had this bit that we would do where I was being sucked into the store, and so I'd be like tugging on her hand. I'm getting pulled in. Most of the time she would indulge that. She'd be like, oh, do you want to go to the bookstore? Yeah, it's irresistible, I have to go. Of course, there were some days where like we didn't have time or whatever, but she liked to encourage my love of reading, and so I think that's just a fun memory for me, being sucked into Walden Books. Question number 5 is a book that you loved as a movie. I think for this one, my answer would be The Princess Bride by William Goldman. Although I didn't read the book until after I had seen the movie. Most people feel the movie is much better, and I would tend to agree with that. The book itself kind of feels like a slightly more wholesome version of a Gregory Maguire book. So if you like Wicked and you're like rereading those books, maybe give The Princess Bride a try. I never read them, I just know that there are a lot. I think The Princess Bride has a very like tongue-in-cheek writing style, which you do see in the film. However, the film is a lot more fast-paced, like witty dialogue, and that is why it is so quotable. I stumbled across a video on Instagram recently that told the story of how The Princess Bride became adapted to film, who read it, what she's famous for. So if you're interested in that, look up Del Rey. Number 6 is a book that you wish they would make into a movie. I feel like when I read a book and I think this would make a great movie adaptation, I'm usually thinking, how would I try to tell that story? And I'm maybe a little afraid of how someone else is going to take it, what they're going to do with it. Obviously, I'm not a screenwriter or a director, so I think my answer would be What You Can See From Here by Mariana Leky. It's such a strange little book, but I think most of the books that I like hardcore love, like favorites, I wouldn't trust to be adapted into a feature-length film. I would prefer that it was told through a series format, but that book I think is short enough. There is a simplicity in plot that would make it into a good movie. And I also like that the story doesn't originate in the States. It's told from a German author, so it would be cool to see that adapted here. I think I've mentioned when I spoke about that book before that it gave me like Wes Anderson vibes almost. Like there's some very quirky characters. It could be a little austere in the way that it's told visually, but I think that it would really come down to the casting and really giving space to reflect on the oddities within that story and the things that are true to life. And I would definitely watch that. Number 7 is a book character that you would like as a friend. First one that comes to mind is actually Forgotten Beasts of Elves. Our main character has this older neighbor, goes to her house and there's like a fire in the hearth, and she doesn't necessarily try to like steer this young girl's life, but she just gives her practical advice. Or in A Sorceress Comes to Call by T. Kingfisher, she also had an older female protagonist. When I think about characters that I love, a lot of times they're like the hero of the story, and I think if I were friends with them, I'd probably end up being the sidekick and I might die. So I think that would be my answer. Number 8 is a place you would like to visit because of a book you've read. London or just England, because I read so many books that are set in the UK, and I think it would be amazing to explore some of like the older cities, but also in the countryside. Walking on the footpaths would be really cool. Just like going to places where some of my favorite authors were inspired, like Austen or Tolkien or C.S. Lewis. That is something that I still hope is in my future as a millennial in these uncertain times. Number 9 is a nonfiction book you would recommend. First one that comes to mind is Know My Name by Chanel Miller. Not only because it's an important story, but because of the way that it's written, I think levels up the genre of memoir. Chanel's writing voice is so unique to her. It's almost poetic. Generally, memoirs are probably the thing that I read the most in nonfiction, although like sometimes I read books that are more under the category of inspirational or self-help. Sometimes those just feel like they should have been a blog post. So my go-to would be recommending memoirs. Question number 10, if you could hang out with an author all day, who would you pick and why? This is so interesting to answer the first thing that pops into my head without overthinking it. My answer for this one is Brandon Sanderson, and this is not necessarily because I love his writing so much. There's just a lot of options for things to do. Like he has a movie theater in his house, and I just think like there would not be a moment of boredom. Like we could go look at the illustrations that are in development for his next 6 books, or you give me a tour of like his bizarre collections of things, and I just think that would be really interesting. I also think he's just a really like friendly and mostly down-to-earth guy, and I wouldn't be uncomfortable spending a day with him. So that would be my answer, even though I've only read Mistborn, The Secret Projects, so I probably wouldn't enjoy it as much as if I had read more of his work, but that would be my answer because it would just be a really really fun and entertaining day. So those are my answers to the 10 top of my head book tag. Thank you so much to the Library Mouse for creating this tag. I think it takes a lot of guts to just make up something of your own and see if it takes off, and I really hope that this does. If you would like to give it a try, I have linked her original video in the description below, and I would love to see your videos with this tag as well. I think it's just such a great way to get to know the readers that you are watching here on BookTube, and I hope to see you in another video soon. Thanks for watching. See you in the comments.